Oh. All right, let's talk about the season. All right, so season 5, how'd it go? Not great if you look at the record. Pretty great if you look at most other metrics. So the team, as it was at the end of the season, was no Wigglytuff, no cast form, but this 11. I was pretty happy with basically all the Pokemon. The plan is I'm gonna go through the Pokemon, some of them by themselves, talk about some of them in pairs and groups. Just kind of give my thoughts on them, give my thoughts on the season and the format as we go, and then I've got some overall thoughts as well. We'll go ahead and start with Heatran, my first pick. Brought it 6 out of 7 weeks, and man, I better be ready for an earthquake, because Earthquake was on, I think, every single team I faced, often more than one. So I did manage to do a number of different things with it. Pretty much always protect, except for the 1 week I had Choice Scarf. And then, I mean, no move came every single time, but for the most part, there was some combination of Fire, Steel, and Ground. Usually at least two of the 3, plus Protect, plus either a coverage move or utility, if I had room for it. Heatran was my main special attacker on a mostly physical team, so I did kind of end up having to bring it a little more often than I would have wanted to. But, I mean, it's got big stats. It's got good typing. It was powerful. I did win only the 1 week I didn't bring it, though, so maybe Heatran's a bad luck charm? Probably not. That seems unlikely. But yeah, I mean, I had to be prepared for ground most of the time. Sash 1 week when I couldn't make it work. Scarf 1 week. Life Orb just to get the damage numbers even bigger. But yeah, most of the time I was running that Shuka Berry, and then just trying to get damage in with Heatran. Overall, I liked Heatran. I wish its move pool was a little broader, or maybe I wish I had used its move pool better, like what it does, because I ran it special every single week. It doesn't have great physical attacking stats, but it's not terrible, and it gets some physical moves, like it gets Iron Head, and I think it gets Flare Blitz. I'm not sure, but I probably could have been a little more creative with it. But that's kind of a thing I noticed in the whole format is there was just less room for creativity and craziness, which you can get value out of in a draft league. So, Heatran was fine. Heatran was good. It was a solid first pick, and yeah, it was pretty reliable overall. Crobat. Let's talk about Crobat. Absolutely the centerpiece of my team, and I didn't even necessarily mean for it to be, at least early in the season and when I drafted it. It came every week. It had Tailwind every week. Inner Focus Tailwind, super fast, is great. That's not actually a hot take, by the way. Having your utility Pokemon be super fast is good. Is a pretty ice cold take, actually. But that doesn't make it not true. Crobat is the Pokemon that brought the highest number of different moves. Now, some of that is just because it was there the most. But, like, you know, Jolteon and Heatran were the 2 second highest. And, I mean, Jolteon, well, we'll get to Jolteon, but, yeah, Crobat was excellent. Absolutely the centerpiece of the team. The ability to get up Tailwind the vast majority of the time was really nice. But it absolutely always had a target on its back. Let me do a little on the fly editing there. On its back. All right. So, I mean, every single week, something was gunning to outspeed Crobat to try and get it. I think I faced a Choice Scarf 7 out of 7 weeks. And between Crobat and my water types, there was often electric moves that I didn't have a ground type to take as reliably. I did have Jolteon, which is why I ended up drafting it in the first place. But yeah, having the super obvious, here's a thing that is important on the team, I think was a little bit of a kind of a downside. Like, there was always targets on particular Heatran and Crobat every week. But I mean, Crobat managed to be good anyway, in spite of the target. Brought 6 different items in the 7 weeks, 2 different resist berries, and I really do think resist berries have never been better than they were in BDSP draft. Some of that is just to do with there are less items, right? Have a lot of the really, really great items that have come along in later gens, Weakness Policy and Assault Vest and Eviolite and things like that. But I ran it physical, I ran it special. The Haze set was pretty nice. That was meant to be that was against Bohm, I believe, and that was meant to be for Swords Dance Scissor and also Shell Smash Blastoise, if I remember correctly. That was the Jordan suggestion, and ended up making me feel a lot more confident in that particular matchup. But yeah, Crobat was great, and draft Crobat, put Crobat on your team. It's very good. Next thing we're going to talk about is the Fakeout twins, Ambipom and Medicham. So Fakeout is great, and everyone knows it. So it's something that has to be taken into consideration in the team builder, right? So by having the multiple Fakeout users, I was able to put that pressure on and keep it on as often as I could. Most of the time I was bringing one or the other. I bring Medicham if I just needed the big hits. High Jump Kick was so beefy. It was doing so much damage into even resisted mons sometimes, at least in the calculations. And then Ambipom when I just needed the raw speed. So when versus Sneasel, Ambipom has to come because they speed tie, and so maybe I win the speed war. But Silk Scarf plus Technician plus double hit was something to not sleep on, right? Technician double hit means the base power is effectively 105 base power multi-hit move. Silk Scarf boosting that another 20% plus stab off of base 100 or 105 attack stat means Ambipom was throwing elbows or throwing tail hands, as it were. Also, an interesting little thing I noticed. I never once took high jump kick recoil damage. Some of that was because of the wide lens, for sure. So use wide lens to make your moves more accurate. But also, I think I just got lucky. Yeah, so at least one of them came every week. They doubled up a couple of times. And draft fake out. It's good. It's good even in max formats, but this is obviously a non-max format, so it's even better. Let's talk about the my scary water type predators. So they were in effect the same Pokemon in practice, not in stats or typing or abilities or move pool, but in the way they ended up getting used, they were essentially filling the same role. So it was one or the other each week. For Alligator came 3 weeks, Sharpedo came 4 weeks. I drafted Sharpedo for its dark typing defensively because I had a lot of psychic weaknesses, but ended up mostly using Sharpedo for its dark typing offensively because I went up against a bunch of psychic types. And so Sharpedo was just getting some KOs that Feraligatr wasn't because of the stab. Being stab plus life orb being a bigger boost than sheer force plus life orb. Feraligatr's great. It's got the two good boosting moves. Managed to use both of them once. Came with Carnivine both times that I used those boosting moves. And interestingly, Feraligatr was my only Pokemon on the whole squad with a positive KD ratio. 6 kills, 5 deaths. So, good job to the Shark. I mean, to the Gator, not the Shark. Well, the Shark too, but for different reasons. I genuinely think my season would have gone better if I had not faced Storm Drain so many times when my main physical attackers were both water types. And that's how it happens sometimes. But I expected Feraligatr to be good, and it was. I expected Sharpedo to be fine, and it was pretty good. So, again, we see those resist berries showing up. I think we had one on Ambipom too. And I think every single resist berry I brought got triggered, but maybe not literally everyone, but the vast majority of them. So if you're doing a BDSP draft, bring your resist berries and you'll get use out of them. Who are we going to talk about next? Let's talk about Jolteon. Jolteon as it says, was a last minute pick that I grabbed to shore up some electric weaknesses, and man, did it overperform. Jolteon's move pool is not good, particularly in BDSP. It's like pretty bad, but it's so fast and it's strong enough that just with Thunderbolt and Shadow Ball, I often just had room for more moves. So I mean, let's see. This is the second most. This is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Yeah, 9 different moves brought in the 6 weeks that Jolteon was there. So most of the time it was Thunderbolt and Shadow Ball plus 2 others. Protective Volt Switch, or Charm Yawn Sunny Day Volt Switch, I think was my set one time, versus Steve maybe. But also let me get a lot of utility out of Magnet, because when you don't need coverage, when you don't have coverage moves, you don't have to worry about boosting the power of your coverage moves. The one downside, I mean, not the one downside, but a downside I noticed in my team composition is that I had a particularly narrow range of speeds, right? So I had 230 base speeds, I had 115, and then I had like 100 or 105 or something like that, and 95. But I had tons of speed clumping, right? So a lot of times it turned out that my opponents were able to just, invest just a little bit extra, a tiny little marginal investment, to outspeed a ton more Pokemon, right? Which is why my opponents were often bringing Scarf something that could outspeed that could hit like 201, right? Because that's my max speed on my 230 base speeds. Jolteon and Crobat were hitting 200 at max speed. So if my opponents could hit 201 for just a little bit of extra speed investment, I was able to just get kind of outpaced. Wasn't always able to get Tailwind up as reliably as I kind of built it in my head. But it's something that I'll definitely keep in mind in the future, particularly with the next draft I'm doing being Little Cup. There's an incredibly narrow range of speeds, right? The fastest mon is 20 speed, so being able to hit that 21 is gonna, I think, be super important. But Jolteon came basically every week, and it was like the dark horse overperformer of my team. I thought it would be okay. Turns out Jolteon was what I needed when I was building a lot. So Haunter, poor Haunter. Haunter was pretty much always not good enough. Almost every week I was like, hey, maybe Haunter this time. And I would build a Haunter set, and I would start doing some calculations, and I'd be like, man, feels like this Haunter energy ball into Gastrodon or whatever should be an Oko. And it just isn't. Even with a Life Orb or with Choice Specs. And so it just wasn't getting the KOs I wanted. And at 95 base speed, it was often not fast enough either. I did bring it with a Scarf to outspeed Gengar once, and that was great. But just in general, I was just not getting the KOs and not getting the and it just wasn't quite fast enough. So Haunter, I would say, is probably the mon I was most disappointed in over the course of the season in terms of what I expected it to do versus what ended up actually happening. But it's a spooky ghost, and there weren't a lot of non-fully evolved Pokemons that were like usable, so Haunter was the best of a bad lot, and turns out it was still usually not good enough. But it is what it is. So Carnivine was fine. Carnivine kind of just did the one thing, right? It has Rage Powder and then 3 other move slots. And so it has Rage Powder. There's not a lot of redirection in the format. So my opponents knew that I had access to that on my team. So they had to prepare for it. But then once they're prepared for it, their job is already done, right? So it wasn't actually as good in battle as I suspect it was in when my opponents were team building. Also, spread moves were coming anyway, right? Discharge to get around Jolteon into all my electric weak Pokemon. Rock Slide because it's good. Earthquake because it dumpsters my Heatran. I mean, the spread moves were coming anyway, so the redirection was not as good, and also Carnivine's only fine. Like, I did end up running it special more than physical, just because it was often I was just looking for a little extra utility, maybe keep it around a turn or turn longer or something like that. So Giga Drain was more useful over the over Seed Bomb, or I think it gets Power Whip, but I never brought it with Power Whip. But again, we've got the Resist Berry there, and Resist Berries are good. So bring your Resist Berries, everybody. Who else we got to talk about? Oh, the roster moves. All right. So let's talk about the ones I dropped. Wigglytuff is a bad Pokemon. It can't get any kills. It can't live any hits. So don't put it on your team. Yeah, Wigglytuff is bad. It was never getting kills, even in extremely favorable circumstances, and it was never living anything because its defenses are so terrible. Like a base 140 or whatever HP stat is nice, but when your defenses are base 30 or base 40 or whatever, like it's just still not living it. So, Wigglytuff's bad. Cast form, I mean, I looked into bringing against Steve in week 2 as a Weather Ball choice specs, but it just wasn't that great, and I never really expected cast form to be good anyway. So, cast form was just a place for me to store 3 draft points in case I wanted to make a roster move. Dusclops I only brought the one time against Poppin as an anti-Trick Room Pokemon, and I brought it in game 1. There was no Trick Room. I actually ended up setting Trick Room with Dusclops, and it just still wasn't. It wasn't that great, but my reasoning I was happy with overall, right? Like, I had a reason to pick it. It was done with intention. I knew my plan going into it, and it just ended up not working out. But that one I ended up very nearly winning that set, and got some particularly rough burn luck, if I recall, that was not great in my favor. That was one reason I lost that battle, or that match, we'll say that. Aaron, however, was great. I will brook no statements to the contrary. I got to meme with it. I almost won with it, and Aaron got a kill. So, good job, Aaron. Tiny little steel dino, level 1, classic, excellent. So one of the sort of lessons, sort of bits of insight that I gathered over the course of this season is that it's not so terrible to have roster duplicates or multiple Pokemon filling more or less the same role. but that do things slightly different, right? So Ambipom and Medicham, I think, were a good example of similar Pokemon serving similar roles, where you would want one sometimes and one the other, and that be worth it. Feraligatr and Sharpedo, on the other hand, were essentially the same Pokemon, and it was which one does more damage in this situation, or which one lives this hit. And like that's too expensive of a price to pay for that kind of granular flexibility when you're limited to 11 Pokemon, right? So sometimes the duplicating roles is acceptable. Sometimes it's a little greedy. So if I was going to draft this season again, I think I would take the Feraligatr and leave the Sharpedo. But I think I would take Medicham and Ambipom again. In the alternate universe where I get to go back in time and have the knowledge that I have now to just do the draft again. The other thing that, I mean, this is not a new thing I learned, but sort of the bane of games with randomness and unpredictable outcomes is you look at the results and you say, oh, that worked, so it was correct, which is not a good methodology for making decisions. One, you can't do it in advance, so it's not actually a method for making decisions, it's a method for justifying decisions after the fact. But also, it's just not as useful, right? In a sort of critical thinking way. So understanding why I made the decisions I made is more important than the actual results of the decision, right? So Dusclops I took for the express purpose of beating Trick Room in Week 5 versus Poppin'. The set I brought was for that reason, and I ended up not needing it, but I do think that Trick Room in that week would have been very bad for me. Like, I mean, in general, my opponent's bringing Trick Room was not great for me because I didn't have great ways to deal with it, right? But that week particularly, Poppin had a good Trick Room mode, and it was scary into my team, right? And so bringing the Dusclops for that reason was a decision I was happy with. It ended up not playing out that Trick Room was relevant in that match, and maybe having Dusclops in game 1 caused me, I could have won if I had a different Pokemon. But I'm still happy with the decisions I made. Sharpedo as psychic protection, essentially, was not as strong of a decision. Like the reasoning was not as great, right? Sure, it's psychic, it's a dark type. It does very well into a lot of powerful psychic type Pokemon, the Lotties and Gardevoir and things like that. Well, it's neutral into Gardevoir, but the strong psychic types in the BDSP format. But beyond that, it just ended up not being that great. Moving on. So my overall thoughts on the format. I really did miss a lot of like having more useful items, right? Particularly Assault Vest, Eviolite, Weakness Policy being the sort of top 3 in terms of items that just make more Pokemon good. The other thing is the huge difference between the top tier mons, the Garchomps and the Togekisses and the Cresselias, and the trash tier 5-point mons was much larger and much more noticeable in drafting, team building, and play than I think it is in larger formats with more viable Pokemon. The third thing is I liked the limited Dex draft format a lot. I've always been a sort of proponent of more options is better in terms of Pokemon and stuff like that, but I actually liked getting to use Pokemon that wouldn't otherwise really be viable. I thought it was really fun. So limited Dex formats are awesome, but they are not without their issues. It might be interesting to try like a BDSP Dex format, but with more items, or maybe two of the top half of the board, something like that, all on the draft board. I don't know. My point is, I liked it, but it was not without its uniquenesses and challenges. It's Little Cup time next, so that's what I'm looking at now. I got my eye on a few of the sneaky ones. Hopefully the Nat Dex season will go good. I suspect it will be fun, if nothing else. But that's what I'm gonna do. Gonna do videos on next, and I'm also just cutting down to one draft league at a time. So it's gonna be just Nat Dex, and I'm gonna be taking season 6 of the regular VBL-S off. So good luck to the coaches still in playoffs. Got top 4 this week, and then finals next week. So good luck to all of you, and join the VBLN and play with baby Pokemon. The end.